Yo, what is up, guys? Will here from Fantasy Flock Basketball. I'm here with Canyon, and we have some waiver wire ads and some traps that we want to talk about. Before we get into any of that, obviously, setting the scene, waiver wires, a lot can change in the NBA night in and night out. Week to week, obviously, but every single day things can change with injuries, weird situations that are going on in the NBA right now, which obviously opens up opportunities for usage. Something I like to utilize a lot when I'm placing props on Underdog Fantasy. If you guys don't know what Underdog Fantasy is, great app and site for utilizing and placing player prop bets for NBA night in and night out. Use it a ton. If you don't have an account, 100% deposit match up to $100 by using code Canyon. The link is in the description. Shout out to Canyon. But let's get right into the waivers. Real quick, before we get into that, I do want to call out that early in the season, a lot of times in NBA fantasy, people will drop players they're frustrated with, or they just needed to drop the worst player from their bench because they needed to pick up somebody to play off of waivers to, potentially win a weekly matchup in both category and points leagues. So I would definitely check for players who maybe had some frustrating games. We had some live streams where people were telling us, hey, should I drop Jabari Smith? He's been pretty bad. He doesn't look great out there. But you just can't drop high upside players like Jabari Smith season long. And we've already seen him produce pretty strong with decent minutes as well in some of these games. So I think just quick before we get into some of these names, definitely check your waivers consistently for players that might have been dropped that definitely shouldn't be.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't drop guys like Jabari, other rookies that might be off to a slower start. Speaking of which, on the same team, another rookie. First guy I'm going to talk about here is Tari Eason for the Houston Rockets. This might be one for bigger leagues and some deeper teams here, but he had a poor game, last couple games, but the minutes are still increasing for Tari Eason. I think he's a guy that's going to be away from a lot of people's radars, and I think he's a guy that's probably on a lot of waivers. Just such good defensive upside and some good scoring and rebounding possibilities. He had a good stretch of like 4 games there where he's hitting 20 minutes per game, and then this last game against the Clippers didn't play as much, didn't have a very good game, but they kind of got blown out there a little bit, so I think that might have impacted it. But Tari Eason's definitely a guy to keep an eye on. He was trending in the right direction prior to this blowout game as far as minutes goes, and then his usage is kind of slowly creeping up as well. Again, he can just be very efficient on any given night, score around the rim, give you some solid points, rebounds, and a very, very good defensive guy. He had a game, I think, with 5 steals and I think like 20-ish minutes, maybe less than 20 minutes. So he's a guy that can come off the bench for Houston there that, is a rookie with a lot of upside that I think specifically in deeper leagues you should keep an eye out for, because I think he can be creeping up to more mid-20s minutes when maybe they get towards the middle of the season or end of the season and they feel more comfortable putting Easton out there in the lineup. So Tari Eason's going to be the first guy that we're talking about here that I think could be very valuable for specifically you guys out there that are in those 14-team leagues or more.
Definitely. And next up, another kind of deeper league. Isaiah Stewart left early with a foot injury in today's game for the Pistons. So I have Jalen Duren and Isaiah Livers here as kind of deeper league plays. I know Jalen Duren's one of those guys who's had some pretty exciting fantasy games with some, crazy block games, obviously pretty efficient rebounding numbers, but the minutes and rotation has not been super consistent or strong for either of these guys. I do think that opens up a little bit if Isaiah Stewart were to miss a significant amount of time, but honestly, I don't think either of these guys are like smash grabs. If you guys have a fab budget or anything, I don't think they're massive percentage guys if Stewart was going to miss significant time, because Bagley is back, and I don't expect to see a lot of Jalen Duren and Bagley in the same rotation. I don't think that's what the Pistons want to do offensively. And Isaiah Livers is one of those guys who I like long term, but I don't know if there's going to be enough offensive usage opportunity for him to have a significant role at all if you kind of just look at the Pistons roster, even without a guy like Isaiah Stewart, who already isn't a huge offensive usage guy. So I think both of these guys are interesting for deep leagues, but even if Stewart were to miss significant time, I don't think either of these guys are, slam dunk smashes, but I do think they both see a little bit of a bump, obviously, with that injury.
Yeah, and honestly, staying within the same team even, you look at the point guard position, and Cade Cunningham is going to be out for, I think, at least 4 games with that shin soreness. So now you got to talk about the Pistons guards, and the rotations have already been looking a little strange with them sending out a different lineup on the night of this recording. But as far as the guards go, if Cade's going to miss some more time, you're looking at Alec Burks or Killian Hayes. I prefer Alec Burks a lot more. I mean, he's played, I think, just 2 games so far, and in kind of limited minutes, he's been quite efficient and a very good scorer off the bench for them. And I think that's what he's going to be doing long term. And so if he can see an increase in minutes, I really like Alec Burks to come off the bench and be a very impactful scorer with a little bit of peripheral upside, but not a lot. But I mean, Burks has been doing this wherever he's in the league, right? Whether he's starting or coming off the bench. We saw it in New York. He can be a 20-point guy off the bench, and he's been getting close to 20 points for the Pistons off the bench in less than 20 minutes. So he's been very efficient and productive for them. So I like to see, Burks kind of take advantage of this opening at the guard spot for the Pistons in the future. If he can get more minutes, I think he can be even better. And even with Cade back, I think he can be really impactful off the bench still. So I think as a long-term play, I really like Burks. As far as Killian goes, yes, I think Killian can give you better rebounds, assists, and defensive upside, and maybe even more minutes. But he's very inconsistent, right? If you're doing fantasy basketball, you probably have already heard the carousel of rumors and predictions about Killian Hayes. And he had a good stretch of 3 games for the Pistons, but I don't expect him to be a consistent double-digit scorer with, 5 or more rebounds and assists and defensive stats. I think he's capable of it, but as far as consistency and production, I don't think you can count on that. Whereas for Burks, I feel better about counting on him giving me 15-plus points with maybe a couple assists or a defensive stat night in and night out. And when you're looking at the waivers, you're grabbing someone off the waivers to play for the week or even for a night that is going to go out there and give you something. And I think Burks is more of the guy to do that over Killian. I like Killian, but I mean, he's just going to be a bit more inconsistent, so I would give Burks the nod there while Cade is out, and even when Cade might be back.
Definitely. I do think Killian probably looks more appealing if you just kind of look at the overall production, the peripherals, and what we've seen over this recent stretch, specifically in games without Cade. But I agree. I do think looking at Burks and what we've seen in these first 2 games, this is kind of what we expected, honestly. A little bit of like Bogdanovich Jr. for the Pistons, right? Just a good 3-point shooter, good scorer, and I think he'll be able to do that for the Pistons, and I think he should see more rotational minutes at the guard spot, right, over obviously guys like Corey Joseph. But I think Killian, I think Casey's going to continue to play Killian, so I still think he'll see strong minutes rotationally behind, Cade and Ivy, but I do think Burks has a little bit more, overall production, obviously from a scoring perspective long term. And then last here, we've got Seth Curry, who, returned from the injury. And, he had some strong games. So I think he's probably a guy who probably was picked up after one, if not the second strong game, but obviously missed the most recent game against the Lakers. So he's a guy who definitely could have been, if he wasn't rostered and was picked up to play, it would have been very easy for that team to just drop Curry again, right? If he's, he's hurt, he's going to miss a lot of, some of these games, initially coming back from the injury. But, with where Brooklyn's at, and you just look at that roster, especially with Kyrie Irving having, seemingly no timetable for returning, we'll kind of see what that situation looks like. Nothing set in stone as far as a return. It was a minimum 5 days or 5 games, and it looks like it's going to be a lot longer than that, but we'll see. But still, I think Curry's one of those guys who probably just should be rostered, just if you look at the Nets overall. And I think he'll have a high 20s in minutes and could be, solid offensive production. Obviously not great peripherals, but, decent enough scorer for a Brooklyn Nets team that kind of needs a guy like Curry. So I think he's probably a pretty decent, strong pickup to play when he is active.
Yeah, I think once he starts, playing regular minutes and getting fully healthy, he's 1,000% a guy that should be rostered, and that time could be pretty soon here. Last up here to kind of wrap it all up, we got a couple traps here for you. Some kind of popular public waiver wire ads that I don't think are very worth rostering or even spending fab on. One of the guys here is Jeremy Sohan for the Spurs. He's had solid minutes thus far as a rookie on this young Spurs team, but it's very, very little upside for fantasy production. He's not going to be consistent in points, rebounds, or assists. He's a good defender, and he might give you some defensive stats every night. But, we've seen him play high 20s minutes, sometimes 30 minutes plus in several games, and he just isn't going to be that guy that needs to score for the Spurs, right? Keldon Johnson, Devin Vassell, they take a ton of shots. And then you've got guys like Jones and Josh Richardson, Doug McDermott, Jakob Poeltl. There's just a lot of guys there that are going to be, looking to shoot more before Sohan. So I don't think he's a guy that you can kind of plug and play and hope to get double-digit points with some rebounds, assists, and defensive stats. I think if the stars align, Sohan could have a good game, but I don't think he's worth a pickup, a plug and play that you can feel very good about. And then next up here, I've got Cam Reddish, kind of the opposite of Sohan, honestly. He's very inconsistent in minutes, but he can pop off any night when he does get 30-plus minutes. We've already seen it a couple times this year. He's had some really good scoring games with some defensive stats and some good rebounds, a little bit of assists. And, I mean, this guy was, a highly touted prospect in college, so we know what he can do when he's capable of, but he's just not getting those minutes right now. He's getting a lot of minutes in its low teens, and then randomly he'll get a 30-minute game due to injuries or matchups or something, or the aha hand. But Cam Reddish, don't be wowed by like maybe a couple 20-point games in a row. I think he's going to be a guy that is going to be floating around more the teens in minutes, so I wouldn't spend any fab on him. If there are injuries that arise, though, and Reddish is kind of the guy to step up and fill in those roles, then he's definitely worth an ad because he can be a very talented and impactful player for fantasy and for the Knicks.
Definitely. Yeah, and those two guys, I know Sohan, you look at a guy like a rookie specifically. So I know I mentioned Jabari early who, at the beginning of the video who, had some early season struggles. And, we definitely want to give rookies more time, with expectations. But I think Sohan's one of those prospects where, even as a, first round pick, you just kind of look at what he can do. And he's definitely, stronger defensively, but not really even like a 3-and-D guy, not a great 3-point shooter. And then, he's had decent games here and there, but just from overall fantasy production standpoint, even though the minutes aren't there, just not something I'm excited about long term. So, I mean, obviously in deeper leagues, right, any guy that's going to see, upwards of 26, 27, 28 minutes is probably worth rostering. But I agree. I think just feels more like a trap, if you get these, strong games where he's playing 30 minutes and, gives you a decent stat line. You feel like there's a lot more upside, but I don't think it exists as much for him specifically. So I think definitely a trap there. But let us know in the comments if we missed any of these waivers. Those are our waiver ads for this week. Obviously, we don't know your leagues. We don't know your guys' rosters or who's available. So let us know if there's any lower percentage owned players in your league that you think should have been on this video. Appreciate you guys. We'll see you in the next one.